Is everybody back and ready to go?
So much fun.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. No, it's fine.
The 261st District Court is back in session.
Thank you. Let's proceed. Excuse me.
Yes. Did you rule on 8:30, which we're asking for admission of pursuant to the motion to seal? So we're asking for admission, but we're not going to put it up.
I did not admit it because before you offered it, I'm not sure you ever did, really. You said it was marked AEO and you wanted to do something to check, at which point we took the break. So I did not admit it yet because I wasn't sure you wanted me to. I'm happy to if you wish to offer it and there's no objection.
We wish to offer it subject to the motion to seal, but it would be because we can't follow the motion to seal until we get it in. But yes, offer it subject to the motion to seal.
Any objection to 830, subject to the motion to seal?
No objection, Your Honor.
Sorry, no objection, Your Honor.
830 is so admitted.
Okay, great. And can you describe what Exhibit 830 is without going into detail of what's in it?
Yes, this is an email correspondence between Willie and myself where we're talking about what we think his subscriber goal should be based on past performance.
And if you look at the second page, is there a list of the types of rankings that Mr. Saylor did on FloSports?
Here.
No, the third page. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, there is.
Okay. And on that list, is there a stock report rankings?
School, prospect, big board, dual, class. Did you say stock report?
Yes.
I don't see stock report.
Do you see a big board?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to 143, F143. Okay, can you identify this document, Mr. Machuca?
I think this is a screenshot of his rankings on Flow Wrestling.
Okay, and can you scroll down to the second page, Mr. Weisbrot? Right.
Do you wish to offer 143?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor, no objection.
I actually
Hold on, Mr. Brudico. I haven't heard from Mr. Brudico yet.
Yeah, I actually don't understand the foundation for this to be a FloSports document, so I object on hearsay.
not clear whose document it is. Perhaps you could stop sharing it for just a minute. Perhaps you can lay a little bit of a foundation for the introduction of plaintiffs 143.
Certainly. Mr. Machuca, were you able to observe that Mr. Saylor was posting big board first on FloSports and then on Rokfin?
Yes.
Objection leading.
Sustained?
So did you just read that Mr. Saylor did big board rankings for FloSports? Is that a fact? Did he do those?
Yes, that is a fact.
And have you observed those on Rokfin as well?
Yes, I have.
And is that what 143 shows? Is it? It's on both?
Objection leading.
I don't understand the question. Is that what it shows? Can you identify that document, sir? Have you ever seen it before?
Can you see it? Well, he
Have
can't
you ever
see it
seen
right
this
I see it
document?
now.
Have you ever seen this
Can you see
document
that?
before?
Of the rankings, of the screenshot
No,
of the rankings,
this
Your Honor?
exhibit, this exhibit F143. Have you ever seen it before?
This exhibit?
No, that's 830.
There's no numbers.
He's
on 'em,
looking.
Your
He's
Honor.
looking at something different than you are. Hang on, just a moment.
Well, if you could show him exhibit 143, that would be helpful.
That's what we're doing right now, Judge.
You ever seen it before?
Yes, Your Honor.
Where?
I've seen this on Flow Wrestling's site, this exhibit, and I've seen this one on Rokfin's site.
When you say this one, are you pointing to the second page of the same exhibit?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And so what is this exhibit that you've seen before? This document, what is it?
This is a screenshot of the big board rankings that Mr. Saylor produced for Flow Wrestling. And then on page 2, Your Honor, it is a screenshot of the big board rankings that Willie Saylor is now producing for Rokfin.
Okay. And you've seen them on these respective sites, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Any other objection, Mr. Brutico? That one is overruled.
Your Honor, I'm not clear. Is the witness's testimony that with the red bar, he's seen these on the website?
I don't know what you mean by the red bar.
In both documents, there's a red, I don't know, rectangle that is over these stars. Am I looking at the wrong document?
I don't know what you're looking at, so let's get some clarification. The rectangle, does everybody know what Mr. Brutico is talking about? I think what he's suggesting is that there may have been some alteration of some difference between what the screenshot shows and what this exhibit shows. That is, the exhibit may have some enhanced highlighting, if you will, kind of thing on it, perhaps. So can you tell us if what you saw on the website had this rectangular bar on it, or just if you saw a document with the same information but without that bar, or did you see it with the bar?
So on Flow Wrestling's website, Your Honor, I have seen this produced, this on our website, sans the red bar. This red bar has been added. I assumed I didn't need to speak to that, Your Honor, because I don't know.
No problem.
Then
So
on this page,
yeah, so Ms. Burgess, perhaps you could help us by explaining where the red bar came from. Is that some highlighting? Is that some highlighting by your office to make a point?
It was highlighting by people at FloSports to make a point. Yes,
Okay, so
but it was admitted at the TI.
it's all right. Just substitute a clean version of it, and it'll be admitted without the additional highlights, if you will. Just give us a clean version of 143 with the 2 pages without the rectangles or whatever on it. And otherwise, Mr. Brutico's objections overruled, and 143 as substituted will be admitted.
Now, is 143, is that rankings or rankings data?
this is 143, correct?
Yes.
This is rankings.
Okay. And what kind of thing goes behind, what is that based on? What are the rankings come out of?
So one, it comes out of all of the data that Mr. Saylor procures and keeps. If, it's as he watches matches, as he watches content, as he interviews and just does his research, he makes notes, he keeps records of everything. And then it is, that is the basis upon which he makes his rankings sheet.
Okay, and is it easy? Can just anyone do it?
No.
Sure.
No, so
Yeah.
no, it's important to understand that Willie Saylor is really good at his job. He probably represents 10% of the people on the planet who can do this job, and it's not easy. And yeah.
And do you need data in order to do it?
Yes.
Let's go to F 797. Can you identify this document?
Yes, this is a screen grab from Rokfin's website.
And what kind of video is this?
This is what we would term a technique video.
And I move for admission of F 797.
I just object to calling it a video. It is not a video, so it's a screenshot. No objection otherwise.
Okay.
Mr. Sotero?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the date. I have no objection to it, I think. I have no objection to it.
797 is admitted.
Okay, and does this screenshot reveal a technique video?
Yes, it does.
And is this the kind of work that Mr. Saylor did or supervised at FloSports?
Yes.
Objection leading.
Sustained?
Earlier we looked at a chart that had Mr. Saylor's tasks on it. Was this the kind of thing that would be included in those tasks?
This would
Objection
fall under the
leading.
technique.
Sustained? Mr. Westbrook, would you stop sharing your screen for just a minute? I'm having a little trouble seeing what's being displayed. If you could just stop your screen share for just a minute, I think that might enhance my view here. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Ms. Burgess.
Okay, and I think you already testified that was a technique video.
I believe so. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
And did Mr. Saylor do technique videos at FloSports?
Yes.
Did he also supervise other people doing that?
Yes.
Did he do interviews at FloSports?
Yes.
Let's look at F802. Is it okay if we share screen again, Judge?
Yes.
And can you identify this document?
This is a screen grab of an interview. We would also, term of art, call this a commitment video. You
What?
could also call this a coverage. You could also call this an interview.
I move for admission of F802.
No objection.
I didn't hear Mr. Brudico.
No objection.
802 is admitted.
Is this the kind of video that Mr. Saylor did for the kind of interview that Mr. Saylor did for FloSports?
This is a screenshot of the type of video that he would do himself at Flow Wrestling and also supervise other people doing it at Flow Wrestling.
You called it a commitment video. What does that mean?
It just means that I believe he's getting an interview from a wrestler announcing his commitment to a school.
To a university?
Yes.
Let's look at F704. Did Mr. Saylor write articles and opinion pieces at FloSports?
Yes.
And can you identify this?
This is a screen grab of an article called Match Notes. This is a bucket, a type of content we would do at Flow Wrestling. This is Mr. Saylor, a screenshot of the same material Mr. Saylor has produced on Rokfin.
And this was on Rokfin?
Yes.
I move for admission of F704.
No objection.
No objection.
704 is admitted.
Could we go to F6? Can you identify this document?
This is a screen grab of the team page from Rokfin's corporate website.
Actually, that isn't actually correct. So I'm gonna not move on this exhibit with you, but rather just ask you which of these individuals used to work at Flow.
Hi, the VP of product, Jaime Bert B. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna
Brugueras?
butcher. Yeah, yes, ma'am. Nick Villiquet, VP of Consumer Marketing. Those are the two employees.
Did Joe Valiquette ever work at FloSports?
He did as an intern.
Okay, and was Patty Soch involved with?
I'm sorry, Patty Sock at one point was our CFO, and then Nick Shank was also our, as it says, he was the former senior vice president of
I
marketing.
don't know what you mean by as it says. That document's not in evidence, so.
Okay,
Sorry.
we can take
We
that.
have to do- Perhaps Ms. Burgess can clarify because I didn't understand that to be the question.
Okay, yes. Of Rokfin's team, which of the individuals used to work at FloSports or be affiliated with FloSports?
I understand. VP of product, Jaime. Joe Villiquet, lead engineer. Nick Villiquet, VP of consumer marketing. Patty Sock, former CFO of FloSports. Nick Shank, former SVP of marketing for FloSports.
Let's go to F7.
I don't see one there.
And I believe this is already in evidence. Does Rokfin compete for wrestling content?
Yes.
Seven is
Okay.
not in evidence by my notes, so let's get that cleared
Okay,
up.
we must have it in twice.
I've seen it before, but it must be marked as a different number because it is 7 is not yet been admitted according to my notes.
I thought, right, I think it must have a different number because I thought I admitted
seen it
it during,
before.
or
I've definitely,
right, I thought that. I know that Mr.
It
Mr.
might
Windler
be-
testified about
you
it.
might want to double check it with 873, perhaps, or another one, but I don't believe 7 is, it's not admitted as 7 anyway, but the document is familiar.
It is 873, Judge. And I see Mr. Weisrod is also nodding. Very good matching. So so this is actually, I'm showing you what's already been admitted as.
You do
exhibit
realize that
873.
I get paid to pay attention, right?
Yes. The 873, does this show Rokfin competing for wrestling content?
Objection leading.
Sustained?
Can you tell us about what this shows?
This is a screen grab of an article announcing Rokfin as a new streaming partner or partnering with a wrestling entity.
And is that wrestling entity a group that you have a relationship with as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and let's look at F185. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll skip that one, Mr. Weisrod. We can skip that. And let's go to F255. Did we already get that in? Oh, we already got that in. We got that in with Mr. Windler. So I'm going to skip that as well, so we can not duplicate efforts here. Let's go to. So you can take, or the screen is down. All right, Mr. Machuca, did you, when Willie left and went to Rokfin, did you try to replace him?
Yes, I did.
What did you do to try that?
We took steps to backfill him on his video show, FRL, a very long-standing show on Flow Wrestling. We hired an outside person to come co-host with the Flow Wrestling staff. We reassigned members of the content team to Willie's duties. Some people were on ranking, some people were helping support the event side of Willie's, Mr. Saylor's duties. We also brought on as a freelancer an outside expert who could, we hoped could, backfill Willie quicker, because we knew it was going to take a lot of time to get our internal team up to speed.
And did the replacements, were they able to make up the deficit from Saylor leaving?
No.
Why didn't it work out?
Well, as I said, Willie is really good at what he does. And so Mr. Saylor is really good at what he does. And so not only were they not able to make up the deficit of Willie's ongoing duties, their actual performance began to slip because they're losing focus on their normal day-to-day beat or day-to-day duties, and now trying to learn and cover for someone else on the team.
Has FloSports been damaged by the defendant's actions?
Yes, it has.
Have subscribers canceled their FloSports subscription?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading.
And
Sustained.
objection foundation.
Okay, how have you been damaged?
Wait,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question, Your Honor.
I didn't hear the question either. She's going to ask another one. Go ahead. I sustained.
How-
Go ahead.
Right, I understand. I think it was one of those situations where multiple people were talking, so it was muted out. But how has FloSports been damaged?
Objection
We've lost
foundation.
subscribers.
Overruled.
We've lost subscribers. We've lost events. There's been, a lot of other damage to the team, but mainly it's we've lost subscribers and we've lost events.
Let's go to F77. Actually, let's not go to F77. Let me just talk about F77. Because the experts have that, right? Okay, let me just ask you a question without the exhibit. Tell me about reason codes at FloSports, cancellation reason codes.
So when a subscriber goes into our system and cancels, they can select a reason.
Okay, and how reliable is that data?
Not well. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean. So if someone selects a reason code, I have no reason to assume it wouldn't be that's the reason. However, not many people pick a reason code. They just, I don't want to do this, cancel. I've never done one personally. So we get a lot more people canceling than we do cancels with reason codes.
Okay, and have you, how do you use that data?
It informs, we use that data to inform the next iteration of whatever impact that particular reason code may be having.
About how many options does a consumer have on the cancellation codes?
I'm sorry, I don't know precisely.
Okay, is there an other?
There is another.
Okay, and if you hit other, do you also have to fill something in?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Oh, that's fine. It's not a pop quiz.
Yeah.
Tell me about FloSports employee retention survey.
So FloSports does ongoing internal net promoter score to understand, the engagement, health, and happiness of our workforce. Also in that survey, we will ask different questions from how's your manager, how do you just a large battery of questions. Some in particular will be, how long do you think you'll stay at FloSports? 6 months, 2 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years. They'll give some ranges you can choose from. And so we'll use that data to look at our staff and try to understand whether or not we might have, retention problems with our employees. Are they happy, engaged? Are they going to be leaving soon?
Is that something you do rely on?
Yes.
Now, do you consider Patreon a competitor?
Yes.
Why is that?
If they're doing subscription content in our sports, then I would consider it competitive.
And did you see a tweet by Andrew Spey promoting Dan Lobdell on Patreon?
I haven't seen the actual tweet. It became known to me as a corporate rep. Yes.
Okay. And is it consistent with FloSports branding or competitive strategy to do that?
No.
Why would that be done?
I can only speculate as to why Andrew Spey retweeted or tweeted that Dan Lobdell's ranking set or content. That number one, I think it was a mistake. Number two, they're close friends, and it is not something that I want to happen. I think it was a mistake. He should be, corrected.
All right. With that, I'm going to pass the witness.
Can I go, Your Honor?
As I mentioned to Mr. Saltero, just keep it going unless I stop you. Let's just, no need to just go right into the next person unless I instruct you otherwise. Just it'll save us some time.
Won't ask again. Okay, Mr. Machuca, good to see you again. Good afternoon. I'll pick up right where you left off with respect to Mr. Spey. Did you discipline Mr. Spey as a result of this tweet that you have just testified about?
I have not yet disciplined Andrew Spey.
Do you plan to?
I will have a conversation with him. I certainly will.
What will the level of discipline be?
I haven't determined that yet.
Are you going to fire him?
I don't know. That's not my intention right now. No.
Okay. So you're going to talk to him and say, hey, that we don't do that here?
Something like that.
And why doesn't, what's wrong with promoting someone who is merely writing about wrestling events, presumably some of which FloSports will be carrying live and broadcasting?
I would rather Spey focus on his own content and promoting our own content on our site. We do plenty of it.
Well, hasn't Mr. Lobdell been told that as long as he doesn't go to Rokfin, he can write about wrestling anywhere else?
I wouldn't characterize.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wouldn't characterize it like that. No.
How would you characterize it?
I had a conversation with Dan Lobdell. I asked him where he planned on going. He mentioned some sites. I said that I think most of those are fine. My main concern would be Rokfin. He actually didn't even offer up Rokfin, but.
What other sites did he tell you that you said were okay? I'm
sorry, Mr. Brutica. I'm not recalling all of them. I know he mentioned Patreon.
You recall any others?
I don't want to get it wrong. I think he may have said track wrestling. I think he may have said, I don't know.
Okay, so you can't recall any others? I'll remind you, you're under oath, obviously.
Yeah, I know. It's not that. I just don't want to be. No, right now, to the best of my recollection, Mr. Brudical, I do not.
Okay, okay. And obviously, his name is not actually the Wrestling Nomad. That's a moniker, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And that's a moniker he's using on Patreon, correct?
I believe you. When I was looking at the content, I don't recall seeing that moniker, but if you're saying that, I would believe it.
And he obviously used that moniker at FloSports, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so going back to just the general concept of competition, you recall when I took your deposition, or Mr. Soltero and I took your deposition about a month and a half ago?
I do.
And you were the corporate representative for FloSports in that deposition, were you not?
I was.
Okay, I just want to confirm that you could tell that the court, various entities that you consider to be competitors, you testify that you believe that sports video technology companies are competitors to FloSports, correct?
I believe they could be, yes.
And professional teams like the NBA and the NHL could also be competitors?
They also could be, yes.
Yes. Do you believe that the MLB network is a competitor?
I believe it could be, yes.
Well, I mean, I'm asking actually, are they? They provide live sports events behind a paywall, correct?
They do, yes.
So they're a competitor?
Yeah, I would consider them a competitor.
Sure. And Olympic governing bodies like USA Swimming and USA Wrestling, if they chose to do their own production and they wanted to do their own content, you would consider them a competitor, right?
Yes.
And national print and online publications that do not do video, but that report on sports, you consider those to be competitors, right?
Yes.
And FloSports considers those to be competitors, correct?
Yes.
And any newspaper with a sports department, whether it be national or local, FloSports would consider those to be competitors as well, correct?
If they're doing content in some of the sports that we're in, or some of the segments we're in, Mr. Brudical, yes, I would.
So if you're just saying, in the very unlikely event that if a sports page did not report on any of your 26 vertical sports, then they wouldn't be a competitor? Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, Mr. Brudical, you kind of confused me.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine how a sports page of the Austin American-Statesman or any local newspaper would not be a competitor in FloSports' eyes. Can you explain to the court how that would be?
Yeah, so right now, the Austin American-Statesman, when we're going after football rights, I haven't seen any wrestling content on the Austin American-Statesman. If, you know, we were going after rights and then all of a sudden we didn't get those rights and the Austin American-Statesman was streaming those rights and doing content on Texas football content that we were also in competition with, then I would consider them a competitor.
Well, didn't you testify at the deposition that it did not depend on whether an entity was competing for rights, that content is enough to constitute competition?
Judge, I'm going to object to improper impeachment. If he wants to impeach the witness, he has to ask and then he has to show him the evidence. He can't just recharacterize his deposition testimony.
I think he's asking him to clarify his position on it. That's all. So I'll overrule that objection. But I'll ask you to re-ask your question because it was kind of long, and let's make sure he understands what you're asking him.
When somebody, a lawyer cites the deposition in his own characterization, the client should get the witness should get a chance to look at that.
Absolutely. If you want to show him in your office a copy of it, you can do that. But Mr. Brutico may just ask him what his position is. What is, Mr. Brutico? If Mr. Brutico wants to ask him specifically if he said X or Y in the deposition, you're absolutely right. I didn't understand the question quite like that, but
That's how, sorry, that's how I took it.
I will ask another question. Mr. Machuca, I understood your testimony sitting here today to be that you do not have to be competing for live rights to be considered a competitor by FloSports. Am I correct?
So, I'm really sorry. It's been a long day. I sort of blanked out. Can you ask it one more time? I apologize to everybody.
It relates to live rights, Mr. Machuca. You know what my live rights are, correct?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. And is it your testimony that the only competitors of FloSports are those that compete against FloSports for live rights?
No.
Of course not, right? Is your testimony that if someone provides wrestling content or any kind of content, whether it be live rights or not, in any of the sports verticals or competition verticals that FloSports has, FloSports considers them a competitor, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So the Austin American Statesman, regardless of whether they're competing against you for football rights, you would consider a competitor, correct?
Yes, as I said. Well, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm thinking of the Austin American Statement. Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, media TV networks like the Longhorn Network or the Big Ten Network, those would be considered competitors of FloSports, right?
Yes.
In Amazon, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, those are straight up competitors of FloSports as far as FloSports is concerned, correct?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And Netflix and Hulu, same thing, competitors, right?
Yes, sir.
Twitch, competitor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and remember I asked you about video production companies. Do you consider video production companies to be competitors?
In that segment of the business, yes, they could be.
Okay, and the segment of the business that you're talking about is what?
Video production, for instance.
Yeah, FloSports produces a lot of their own events in-house, correct?
That's right.
Okay. But we also talked about sports agencies and sports PR firms. You testify, or you believe that, and FloSports believes that sports agencies and sports PR firms are competitors. Does it not?
They could be competitors, yes.
They're competitors because they can provide sports content for money, right?
Or even free.
Or even free. Thank you. And casinos, you believe, and FloSports believes, would be competitors if they own an event and they want to put it on themselves. Then you're competing with them for putting on that event. Is that right?
Or not even the event, if they were just doing content.
Okay. And when you say just doing content, can you just make sure the judge understands what you mean by that?
Not live events.
Right. Anything that's not a live event is considered content?
No, sir. I'm just, previously in the testimony, you made a to-do about the fact I didn't say one was live or not live. And so now you're saying this is live. And so I just don't want to be, I don't know, caught off guard. So I'm like, well, hold on now. So I'm just trying to be, I'm on pins and needles trying to say the right word at every answer. And it's monotonous and long. And so I don't want to screw anything up.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. With respect to Rokfin, of course, you consider that a competitor, but regardless of whether Rokfin charged for its content, charged money for its content, you would still, and FloSports would still consider Rokfin a competitor, right?
That is correct.
And if Rokfin channel partners did not have the ability to stream live events or even to do video, and they were just, some of their channel partners were writing about sports related content, you would still consider Rokfin to be a competitor, right?
Their audio for me missed a couple of times, Mr. Brudicow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so if Rokfin channel partners could not broadcast or live stream any events, and they couldn't even do video, but they still posted content about sports related activities, FloSports would still consider Rokfin to be a competitor, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So basically, if you can access competitive content on a site or platform, it's competitive as far as FloSports is concerned. Is that right?
If it's in the verticals or segments we're going after, yes, sir, I would.
Right. So you familiar with Roku?
Yes.
Okay, like Apple TV, it allows you to stream media content from various online services, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, I believe.
Right. I mean, not just Netflix and Amazon Prime, but also ESPN and FloSports, right? FloSports is on Roku, right?
Yes, sir.
So clearly, you can access competitive content on Roku, correct?
Yes.
So you believe that Roku is a competitor then, is that right?
I haven't seen Roku do any subscription sports content. Like when I turn on my Roku, I never see an ad from Roku saying presented from Roku live wrestling content. It's usually, so I've never seen Apple TV produce a Game of Thrones commercial. HBO does that. So, I mean, it could be, if we're in the realm of possibility, sure. Apple now is producing content. They're producing digital content all the time. A year ago, I would say maybe, and now they are. So I'm not sure how best to answer your question in sufficiently bulletproof form.
Roku costs money. It's not free, right? You have to buy the actual device to hook onto your TV, right?
It can be given to you also.
It costs money in the store, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And through that purchase, you can access online sport-related content that FloSports would consider competitive, right?
Yes.
So why isn't Roku a competitor in your mind?
Because they're not in the act of creating or competing with us in the world. Like the internet cable that comes out of the street, I wouldn't consider that a competitor. Right?
Okay,
One is just a pipe. If the pipe all of a sudden started creating content actively, if I went to go hire a new content creator and I said, sorry, man, I just took a job for Roku, I'd be, dang, I guess now we're competing for employees. I didn't know they did that.
So so Roku to be a competitor has to create content. Is that your testimony?
I would broaden the create. I'm not sure what you mean by create content. It could be streaming content. They could be, if they're, procuring rights or paying writers and going after, if we're rubbing up against them in the business world, I would consider them a competitor.
Well, you just said streaming. Roku is a streaming platform. You mean Roku itself, the entity, the company streaming its own content, right?
No, if Roku all of a sudden started creating content.
Okay.
If
I
they-
used the
if
word creating
Roku-
content,
if
and I
Roku-
thought you said that you didn't know what I meant by creating content. I thought that was your term. You just used it again. I'll move on. Let's talk
Well,
about.
I just didn't want to make.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that we expand create content to not just written or video, but also live. As I said, I feel now I need to really bulletproof every word that comes out of my mouth. So I'm just trying to be, and it's very monotonous. I'm like trying to, walk a tightrope here.
I appreciate that. So let's talk about Mr. Saylor's PIIA, can we?
If you would wish.
Okay. Obviously, we've talked before. You've mentioned on previous occasions that the PIIA, among other things, prevents Mr. Saylor from being involved in providing products and services in the sports video industry, does it not?
That is correct.
And you and FloSports believe that anything that FloSports does or has done, it falls within the category of sports video industry, correct?
That is correct.
In fact, FloSports actions actually define the term sports video industry by whatever FloSports chooses to do. Isn't that what you believe?
It's products and services, yes.
Right. So you believe, in fact, that everything that FloSports has done in its history is included in the definition of sports video industry due to the simple fact that FloSports did them, correct?
Well, we've done a lot of stuff. So I think if it's an ongoing or area of interest, products and service, and it was significant in our business, I would consider it, yes.
Oh, okay. So it has to be ongoing. It can't be something that was done in the past and then no longer was done by FloSports. Is that your testimony?
Well, I don't think that's quite what I said. What I mean is we've done stuff in the past. And so I don't know everything we've ever done. I don't know. If it's things we are doing that we would consider we're doing them sufficiently and there's an ongoing product and service. You just said if there's anything we've ever done as a product and service. You know, I don't know what Mark Floriani went to China and did in 2008. So, but I think it's pretty clear in the PIIA that what Willie was doing, that was his role. And he can't do that role for somebody else.
So is what you're saying that at the center of this controversy, there's no dispute about what sports video industry means, but around the edges, like if FloSports did something at one time and is no longer doing it, that then there might be an ambiguity as to what it means?
I'm going to object that that calls for a legal conclusion and speculation both.
No, it's just asking him what his definition is. And I think that's what Mr. Brudico is trying to do, is just find out what he thinks about this. What's his opinion about these issues? That's all. So the objection's overruled. You can answer that question if you can.
So yes, if we've done something in the past and it's an area of interest, an ongoing product and service, or if it's something that, yeah, if we have done it in the past, I would, and someone else is doing that, I would characterize them as competitive.
Okay, and I know we're all tired, it's Friday afternoon, but I think I heard you say, yeah, if we did it in the past and it's ongoing, but then I also heard you say, if we did it in the past. So let's just remove the assumption or the hypothetical of something that you're currently doing. My question is this, Mr. Machuca, if there's an event, some type of business activity that FloSports did and then no longer did, is no longer doing at the time an employee leaves, would that be within the definition of sports video industry?
At this point, I feel like I need to know what the example is.
Okay, so it might depend on the facts.
I think it should depend on the facts.
Okay. Now, I've asked you before if FloSports had used the term sports media industry instead of sports video industry, would it have made a difference? And do you recall that?
I do, Mr. Brudico.
Yeah, and I think that you testified about this earlier, that you said, well, it wouldn't make a difference because it's just whatever we do. We could have used the word onion instead of sports video industry and it would have had the same definition. Do you recall that testimony?
I do.
Okay. So does that mean that if FloSports changes its business model, that, I mean, completely, would employees still be prevented from, in your mind, from working in the sports video industry? Do you understand the question, Mr. Machuca?
Complicated hypothetical.
I don't recognize that as a legal objection, so it's overruled. But
It's an improper hypothetical.
let's ask Mr. Machuca if he understands the question. It could be a little bit vague for him, and let's find that out. Do you understand what he's asking you?
He's saying that if someone signed a PIIA in the past, and then all of a sudden FloSports changed what it was doing, would that PIA that was signed by the employee in the past still be binding if we changed our business model after we signed it? Is that what he's asking?
So Mr. Burdico will rephrase perhaps his question, because you can't really ask him a question. I suppose it would be helpful now that he knows where you're coming from, if he can confirm or not those assumptions on your part. But I'll ask him to ask a different question, or a rephrased question that will clear it up.
Thank you. Understanding, Mr. Machuca, that what FloSports is actually doing and what FloSports has done actually is the definition of sports video industry. I'm asking you, if FloSports changed its business model, would that still mean what its new business model is? Would that still be the definition of sports video industry in your mind?
I guess, what do you mean by business model?
Let's say that they got out of sports and got into, selling vacuums.
Well, I have no idea how to answer your question. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I don't understand.
You don't have an answer because you don't understand the question?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I'm just confused.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna try to get through to you because it's important to me. I understand, Mr. Machuca, that you're saying that what FloSports does defines the term sports video industry. And I'm asking you, if FloSports did something else, would that still be true? Would that still define sports video industry?
I guess yes.
Okay.
It would just be highly irregular for us to say sports video industry if we all of a sudden started selling vacuums. It would just be a non sequitur. It would be ridiculous.
Are you
But it could be-
aware,
could be
Mr. Sorry, I thought you were finished.
Sorry, no, I am, sir.
Okay, thank you. Are you aware of any unprivileged documents within FloSports that defines the term sports video industry?
I don't know.
Okay, do you recall testifying in this matter at the temporary injunction hearing in late December of last year?
Yes. Sorry.
Do you remember talking about Mr. Saylor's rankings?
I remember that topic. Yes, sir.
And in describing them, it was your testimony back then that rankings are important to your business model because it's how you hype or create excitement around an event. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Is that a correct statement?
Yes, that's a correct statement.
Now,
I would also say, Mr. Brudicow, that it's not limited to that. I also said in our testimony earlier today, that not only does it hype events, but also engages subscribers year round. So
now,
I don't know if I said something wrong there, but I'm like, yes, that's not the everything, but that is part of it. Yes.
Okay. So now, just because somebody is engaging in competitive activity in under FloSports' definition of competitive, doesn't mean that FloSports necessarily feels that they're doing any harm to FloSports. Is that right? Is that fair?
That's true. That's fair.
Okay. So, I mean, one reason why I believe that FloSports allowed Mr. Lobdell, the wrestling nomad, to go to Patreon was because it didn't view it as harmful to FloSports. Is that fair?
That is fair.
And FloSports, just because they think that somebody might be violating a non-compete, doesn't always choose to enforce those non-competes if they don't feel like it's being harmed, right?
Hold on, I need to object to relevance, Judge. This is the waiver argument that we previously briefed to you, that selective enforcement is permitted in Texas.
Yeah, I don't think you're trying by consent the waiver issue. We've already, I mentioned that ruling yesterday, but I'll overrule the objection. I think the question is a fair question.
And Judge, should I continue to make the objection to preserve it, or should I, is there sort of a running objection based on the brief?
Questions which begin with the word should sound like you're asking me for advice. As you know, I cannot give you legal advice and would never pretend to do so with any level of competence. So whether you should or shouldn't is a choice you will have to make, but I will note your objection. You are not, and I made it clear yesterday with regard to this issue that you've just briefed and sent in a brief about today, that it is not being tried, you won't be considered to have been tried by consent on your part.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't remember. I think I might have had a question.
I'm sorry. Yeah, was there an answer? I didn't get an answer.
He didn't answer it because there was an objection. Now that that objection has been overruled, he may answer the question if he remembers it. If not, Mr. Brutico may re-ask it.
Can I ask the court reporter to read it?
Once again, Mr. Brutico, you have the ability to do whatever you like. You must simply choose for yourself, as Ms. Burgess learned a minute ago. She must choose for herself what action you wish to take.
May I ask the court reporter, please, to repeat the question that was asked before the objection?
Happy to do so.
In FloSports, just because they think that somebody might be violating a non-compete doesn't always choose to enforce those non-competes if they don't feel like it's being harmed, right?
Right.
Lobdell, the wrestling nomad, would be an example of that, right? He's clearly, in FloSports' mind, violating his non-compete by doing his wrestling content on Patreon, but FloSports did not think it was sufficiently dangerous for it to bother, correct?
Yes, Dan Lobdell called me up and we had a conversation about it, and the way he approached it and the circumstances under which he left at the time. Currently, I don't feel it is competitive. Absolutely. Don't feel it's any harm.
I'm sorry, did you say you don't feel it was competitive? Absolutely?
No.
Can you explain that?
Since it's competitive, absolutely, but we don't feel that it was causing harm.
And why is that? Why is someone who is writing about wrestling and ranking on Patreon, a paid online service, creating any harm to FloSports?
You know, if we were going after rights or we were at an event and I said, can we get some access? And he said, sorry, I'm only giving access to Dan Lobdell. That would be, I would consider that we're being harmed by that. Or if that's Dan's intention to go and procure access to deny it from us. But in fact, when I spoke on the phone with Dan, Dan said, hey, I want to begin working again. I want to remain friends. I want to keep working closely. What can we do? I said, man, I hear you. It stinks, the situation. What do you want to do? I want to do wrestling content. For whom? Not really sure yet. And the conversation kind of went on. I said, well, you know, Rokfin has to be a no. We're in this lawsuit. They're really competitive. I don't know, Patreon. I don't know if he mentioned any other verticals, but that's how it was the approach and the conversation, the openness. And that's what we've done every time someone's quit or been fired.
Why is Rokfin a greater threat to FloSports than Patreon?
Because they're taking subscribers, because of what the information that Willie's has in his head, and the fact that he's been so cavalier in his cause to use it, and the fact that using material that he took from us and that we've lost events to him.
Mr. Machuca, you know that you can live stream an event on Patreon, right?
Actually, I didn't know that.
Okay. And did you know that Patreon has 10 times the numbers of content creators on the wrestling vertical than Rokfin does?
If you say so.
Okay. So when you say you lost rights to Mr. Saylor, are you referring to the Nittany Lions event?
I am.
Are you referring to anything else?
No, I just know in my mind, what flashed in my mind was him tweeting out, thanks to all the coaches that are only going to let me come do content with them. So there's other instances.
Right, but you haven't testified about that on direct, about any thanks to the coach's email from Willie, right? You did not talk about that on direct, did you?
I thought I may have mentioned it in the deposition, that tweet.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, in this trial.
No, sir. I
Okay,
think so.
but it is your testimony, Mr. Machuca, that Willie Saylor is the reason why the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club decided to broadcast their event on Rokfin. Is that right? That's what you're telling the court.
I'm sorry, what do you mean? You said reason.
I'm going off your testimony that you said you lost an event to Mr. Saylor. That's a big allegation, right? And I'm asking.
That's true, though. That's true. That is true. We lost the event.
Now I'm asking a question.
You said reason. You said reason.
Excuse me. I shouldn't have to say that 3 times, sir. So you can't speak at the same time. It's disrespectful to those that are listening, and most especially to our hardworking court reporter who's staying late after 5 o'clock so we can get through this part of our testimony to a good stopping point before we come back on Monday. Let's please be respectful, even though it's late in the day. Mr. Brutico, you may ask your question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Machuca, I had asked you whether it was your testimony that Willie Saylor was the reason why the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club decided to broadcast its wrestling event on Rokfin. And I was asking, is that your testimony?
He is part of the reason, not the whole reason.
Okay, and what is Mr. Saylor's fault in that reason, or how is he responsible at all for the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club broadcasting on its own channel on Rokfin?
How is Willie Saylor responsible?
Would you like me to rephrase?
And what? It was a long question. I just got tripped up on the. You asked, how is Willie Saylor responsible? Right?
Yes.
Yes. So in his role at Rokfin, he is getting events. He is acting as we would call a rack.
I didn't ask you how he's
participating in
events. I asked you, what has he done to cause the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club to get a content channel on Rokfin and broadcast that event in September?
What has he done to cause Nittany Lions? I'm not sure specifically what specific things. That's the thing. When you say what caused him, I'm not sure what specifically caused.
I didn't say what caused him, Mr. Machuca. I asked, what did he do to cause the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club to get a channel on Rokfin and broadcast the September Nittany Lions Wrestling Club event?
It became apparent to me as a corporate rep that Cale Sanderson's first call was to Willie Saylor, and Willie Saylor participated in the brokering of that deal.
Okay. Okay. Go on.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't. You weren't finished with your answer.
I was.
Okay. So what specifically did he do in the brokering of that event? You said he participated in the brokering. So could please identify what he did to broker that event?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Willie. Mr.
Well, this
Saylor.
is your testimony, Mr. Machuca. I'm asking for the basis of it. Do you have any basis other than the fact that Mr. Sanderson called Mr. Saylor at one time?
In this particular instance, with regard to what Willie did, Mr. Saylor did.
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure all the steps Mr. Saylor took to get that deal on Rokfin.
I'm just asking for what you know. And if you're telling me that all you know is that Mr. Sanderson supposedly made a call to Willie Saylor, I'll move on. But I'd like you to confirm, is that all you profess to know?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Lobdell isn't the only rider that FloSports has allowed to, in your words, compete with it, correct?
Well, let's stop there because that's kind of a different subject. So this might be a good time for us to take our afternoon break. And so we'll stop the live stream. We'll give the court reporter time to rest. I do want to talk about some housekeeping things. Don't need to be on YouTube, just in terms of Monday. One is I'd really like, I have now been provided by the court reporters, thanks to them, a copy of the defendant's trial exhibit list, which is in a font that someone of my age can actually read. But the plaintiff's exhibit list is in a font which a person of my age has very difficult time reading, frankly. Could you just make that bigger a little? I realize it's long and you were trying to get a lot of things on one page, but it's really hard to read. And so if you could resend that one, that would be super helpful. I don't need the defendants to send in another one because thankfully I got it from the court reporters. But as you know, I do keep track of them as well. It's mostly as a double check and for my own benefit so that I can keep track of what's been admitted already and what hasn't. And so we can keep duplicates down. So it's really helpful for me to have it, although the official record of the exhibits, of course, will be taken by the court reporter. So if the plaintiff doesn't mind, if you could just make the font a little bigger, even if it increases the page numbers, I would really appreciate that. If you all are going to confer on exhibits, and I hope you will over the weekend, in fact, you're directed to do so, so that you can cut down on the time we spend asking if people have any objection or not, particularly for those that don't get objected to. Let's get some agreements about that so we can admit some exhibits and just move much more quickly through the testimony. That'll just save us lots of time. So please work on that. I did receive today the response from the plaintiffs on this issue of the waiver. I've not had a chance to read it because we've been busy all day, but I will do that over the weekend and we can talk about that next week as well. And I think those are all the things I wanted to make sure that we talked about before we break. When we pick up on Monday at 9 a.m., we'll finish up with Mr. Brudico's cross-examination of Mr. Machuco, and then we'll hear from Mr. Soltero for his questions, and we'll finish his testimony up and then move on. Is there anything else that we need to talk about before we break for the weekend? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So when we have any, my brain's not working really well, but when we have any discussion about the waiver and the response and all of that, we need to alert perhaps Mr. Augustine to be here because there may need to be some testimony about that. Do you contemplate having a hearing on that so that I can put him on notice?
Yes, but I contemplate that you all will decide when you want to do that and let me know. And I'm happy to do it whenever you want to do it. Talk about it and let me know and we'll schedule it. You might want to spend some time.
You're calling the APO.
Sorry, Ms. Burgess.
Oh, sure. I wouldn't characterize that as waiver. When I was talking about waiver earlier, I was talking about we know the enforcement. But I know the difference in this. Excuse me. I'm sorry. We know the difference in the substantive issues. It's the stuff that can't be on YouTube versus the stuff that can be on YouTube. Whether that has to do with A, B, or C subject matter is not so important at the moment. It's just whatever has to be done without the stream versus what can be done with the stream. And that's really the issue. Trade secrets, whatever, any issue of substance doesn't matter.